This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to the podcast. As always, I am so happy that you're here. The conversations this month have been so good, and they are going to continue today. I think the one question that many caregivers ask themselves when they leave the NICU is, how am I going to do this? How am I going to balance this baby that may or may not be leaving with some medical needs? How do I balance the duties that I may have at home? How do I balance a job that I have? Or if I don't have a job and I'm looking for a job because we have medical bills to pay? I think that how am I going to do this is a question that every NICU mom, dad, and caregiver has asked themselves when they walk out of the NICU. And today, I wanted to dive into that. I wanted us to talk to someone who asked questions, made a decision, and is moving forward in what that might look like for their family. It may be very different than what your family has chosen. The takeaway that I want you to take from today is, what questions should you be asking? I think it's important to follow someone's journey to say, like, all right, this was their situation and this is what they decided and this is how it's working, because I think we learn from other people. So while we may not necessarily make the same decisions or choices, I think that their life experience can help inform us so that we make the best decision for our particular situation, season, and our family. And I think and know that today's guest is going to help you do that. Kelly Wynne Ferguson is a mom, an entrepreneur, and founder of Kelly Wynne, a lifestyle handbag brand that's been energizing women's wardrobes for the past decade. Following the birth of her second daughter, who had a 42-day NICU stay, Kelly made an announcement recently that she's winding down the business in order to give her family her best self in this season of her life. So with that, let's chat. So Kelly, thank you for being here. I have a bazillion questions for you. I love that we matched today. So if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see that we have the same hot pink color on. Great minds think alike.
Great mind.
Which I think really leads into why, well, there's a couple of reasons why I had you on here. One, you're one of the most fashionable people I know, which certainly is why you started your business, but you're also a great mom. So let's dive in. So Kelly Wynne Handbags is a big deal. You started that. Why did you start it? And what was the reason for you diving into this new space? Because that's not what you went to school for.
Right. I started this business back in 2013, and I started it out of a love and passion for accessories. I did not know this would be God's plan, obviously, but He really placed it on my heart. I collected handbags as a little girl with my mom growing up, and so when I went to college, I was dubbed the accessories queen, and I sort of just fell into this, routine of accessorizing my friends, and always with jewelry and handbags and all the fun accessories. So when I graduated from Ole Miss in 2009, I moved to Dallas, and it was during the recession, so it was difficult to find any sort of job. I had attempted to find a job in New York and thinking that I wanted to do something in the fashion industry, but I also felt like that was really for celebrity type people. I didn't think it was possible to pursue a career in fashion when A, I didn't have a background in it, and B, no one in my family has been in the fashion industry. So it just felt like a very foreign idea. And I ended up landing a job in PR in Dallas. And then I worked at that company for 3 years, and it was a really small company and taught me so much. It gave me a lot of the tools I needed to start this business. And so I started it, really started my research and started talking to people back in 2012. And it took me only a year from the idea putting my business plan on paper to actually having my sketches come to life, which at the time felt like forever. But then I was told, wow, that's fast.
No, that's fast.
Yeah. So I just I just love creating. I'm a creative person. I have this entrepreneurial spirit. And because I just had that love for accessories, I felt like there was a missing space, a missing niche in the market for colorful, bold prints, and which is what I started with, is really what I became known for, was those kind of bold, colorful prints and encouraging women to just step outside their comfort zone and giving them confidence when they walk in a room with a really awesome, beautiful bag on their shoulder.
Well, you have this beautiful family, but when you started this business, you did not have children. And so you had your first baby while also you weren't just working, but you founded this company. So you're kind of the boss. So, how did you balance managing and running a business and then being a mom? What changed for you?
Oh, it was so hard. But it was it was at the time it was really exhilarating because I was pregnant with my first daughter, Neely Wynne, in 2018, and at the same time, Nordstrom picked up Kelly Wynne bags. And so the day they launched the bags on their website was the day that Neely Wynne was born. So it was just
You birthed two things that day.
we were all on a high leading into the birth of my daughter, and then this huge account picking up the bags, which was a pivotal moment for me in business. But I mean, so much has changed from really when I had Neely Wynn and now my second daughter. It's looking back at what I was doing when I had Neely Wynn to what I was doing when I had Faith. It's just very different. I felt like I with Neely Wynn was just I felt like I just had to make it work. She was coming with me and doing everything, and I didn't really give myself the time to even really heal because I was so just consumed with everything I had going on with work. And oh, and now I'm a mom and I've got this beautiful baby girl and I'm going to take her around everything. And I wore myself out really quickly early on. Um, I felt like, in this world of social media, that I had to live up to these expectations of really juggling both and doing it both well and looking good while doing it. And um, it was really, really hard to really nurture both my business and my baby. And during that time, about 4 months after Neely Wynn, I fell into postpartum depression because I was trying to do too much, and I didn't realize what was going on with my body, the changes that were happening, and I tried to hide it because I didn't understand why I was feeling sad when I had this beautiful baby girl that I love so much. And when you think about postpartum depression, you think of the extreme of wanting to hurt yourself or your baby, and that's not where I was. I just was sad and I was crying all the time, and I didn't have that same passion and desire to design handbags and to do work because I just had tried to do it all and do it all well and look good. And I had too much on my plate, and I fell really hard. And so I got some help, and I started telling people about 2 months after suffering through it and crying in the bathroom alone. I finally started telling people. I told my mom first, and she is my ultimate balcony person, the one that's standing on my balcony cheering me on, encouraging me every step in the way. And she was like, "Why didn't you tell me sooner? I could have helped you." But I was embarrassed,
Yeah.
that shame of why am I sad? So it was a really hard transition for me, going from working and it's just, me and Walt, me and my husband, to having that first baby.
So you find, thank you for sharing that, Kelly. I think
Yeah.
while postpartum depression happened to you with your first baby who was not in the NICU. We'll get to your second baby here in a minute.
Yeah.
It's certainly something that many women struggle with. I dealt with that after my sixth baby. So some of us
Yeah.
take a few babies. But I
Right.
think that I'm glad that you spoke into that, because I think that there's someone who we feel ashamed. We feel like we should have it all together because the world tells us that we should. And I love your mom. It's worth mentioning that your mom is a former labor and delivery nurse.
Oh,
Pam is
yes.
amazing. And she is a great cheerleader, I think, for all the women in her life. So as you start to figure out, okay, so this isn't working, I need to get some help, you get some help, and then your business continues to flourish through some of that and through all of that. And then you get pregnant again with your second baby. So Kelly, I know that that second pregnancy and that second delivery was vastly different than your first. So tell us the story.
Yes. I already get emotional when you asking me the question. So I feel like a lot of times we take just a normal pregnancy for granted. I didn't even know what the NICU was until I experienced it, because I thought it was really just for premature babies, or moms that had twins or triplets. And I one day, October 25th, when Faith was born, I was just designing for my next collection, and I had a normal kind of routine ultrasound that had my normal routine ultrasound that afternoon. And I went into the doctor, and Walt was with me. And it was very clear early on, the technician saw that something wasn't right. She was actually like shoving my belly to try and wake up Faith. And she was she was so professional, and she was encouraging. She was like, the baby's just sleeping. But I was like, I know the baby's not sleeping. What's going on? But then we went and talked to our gynecologist, and he was like, we need to rush you into an emergency C-section. The baby scored 2 out of 8, and I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait to see what happens. We need to get this baby out now, and we can do more for the baby in the NICU. That was the first time I'd heard we can do more for the baby in the NICU than we can inside the womb. And so they rushed me into an emergency C-section. And I call my mom, call my family. We call my mother-in-law, who also has the same name as me, Kelly. And they, immediately come to the hospital to be with us. And I was terrified. Walt was also with me. We were both terrified because we didn't know what would happen, what was going on, what was really going on. And we went into that emergency C-section, and they had just had a change shift, and we had the best team to get Faith out. My Dr. Gooch, got Faith out in 7 minutes, and they had to resuscitate her, intubate her in the first 2 minutes of her life, and they just whisked her off without us being able to see her first. Walt did get a peek because we also didn't know her gender. I was so sure she was a boy, but God had different plans. And Walt, it was just kind of just a blur, but Walt looked over, and she wasn't crying, and we were concerned about if she was okay. And he was like, it's a girl. And we, it was just such a different experience than I was expecting, especially finding out the gender for the first time, and not knowing if she was okay, and not getting to hold your baby. That is something that I get really emotional about, because I don't think you realize how important those first few minutes of life are, to get to hold your baby and to have that bonding experience. And I didn't get to have that. And I didn't know if she was okay. But Walt is incredible, and he was just so encouraging. He sat there with me, and we finished the C-section. And then I went to recovery room, and they had taken Faith up, and the neonatologist came to talk to Walt and told him that we have already given her blood transfusions. We need to continue. She had 4 blood transfusions in the first 36 hours. And what we discovered at that point was that he said we had a fetal maternal hemorrhage. So Faith was bleeding into me, and it was a silent hemorrhage.
It's all right. Take a minute.
A lot of times when there's a hemorrhage, the mom will bleed. And so you'll know that something's wrong, but I did not know something was wrong. And her movements inside the womb had slowed down, but I'm so busy with work, I didn't really notice. And I have a lot of guilt from that. Um, I also just thought, I'm a small person, maybe shouldn't have enough space inside of me to move, and I would feel kind of her head bob. And so I was like, well, she's moving, right? But not enough. And so it was a fetal maternal hemorrhage, and they felt like the best plan of action was to put her through a process called therapeutic hypothermia, where they would cool her body for 72 hours to prevent her brain from swelling, give her organs a chance to heal. She had lost so much blood. She had had level 3 out of 15. So if we had waited one more day, we would have lost her. So I was just so incredibly thankful for the technician, the ultrasound technician, my gynecologist for being so proactive, because he's very laid back, which is what I've needed. But to see him spring into action was a blessing. And then the team, and then the NICU, those nurses and neonatologists are angels on earth. I mean, when we walked in to see Faith for the first time, they were so welcoming. It's like I didn't know what to expect. And everyone's hustling and bustling, and they're tending to all the babies. There's so many babies in the NICU. And our bay, which we were in bay 6, and at the time I didn't realize, but it was for the babies in the most critical condition. And we had a team about, I want to say it was 15 nurses, and then our neonatologist that was there at the time. And we rolled up to the bed, and he was explaining to us everything that was going on. And I'll never forget, Dr. Groves got down on his knees on my level. I'm in a wheelchair from having a C-section. And he looked me in the eye and said, "This is not your fault." To have that from this incredible doctor, to be able to say that to me and to get on my level on his knees was another blessing. I mean, it's like God knew I needed to hear that, because I was already feeling so much guilt from being this working mom and doing so much and trying to do so many things. And he got down on my level. And then Faith was there for 6 weeks. So it was 42 days. And the first 2 to 3 weeks of her life, we were terrified that we would lose her. We didn't know if we would walk out of the hospital with her. And every day, Walt and I would pray over her. And Walt was so strong and would say, even if we only know her for 2 days, it has been the biggest blessing. She is a blessing and a joy in our life. And I needed to hear that, because it was so true. But we were praying so hard that God would save her life, and that we would get to bring her home from the hospital like we got to. So,
Kelly, thank you for sharing. I know that it is hard to recount your hardest day as a parent, and I think many NICU parents listening to this can appreciate the hardness of that. So I just want to say thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. So as you, Kelly, as you think about the difference between pregnancy 1 and pregnancy 2, one baby who is quote unquote normal and comes into the world, and then you have this really traumatic, difficult, not only birth, but NICU stay, and you re-enter life, which I always felt was this big dichotomy of like, I'm going from one critical place out into the world, which seems normal. And it's difficult sometimes to balance this critical place and this normal
right.
place. But as you start to move back into a somewhat normal routine at home, and you also enter back into this business, which you're not just a worker there, you're kind of the boss. How did
Right.
that change? How did Faith's entrance into the world and your experience with that, how did that shift what you did on your in your day job?
So while Faith was in the NICU, I thankfully had such a great team that was able to just take charge because I could not focus on anything else. I just had to be at the hospital as much as I could while also balancing that I had another precious daughter that needed my attention as well. There was really no sense of normalcy because we were living with my in-laws at the time, renovating our house. And so it was honestly a blessing in disguise because Kelly Wynne, my oldest daughter, had constant like attention. People were around her all the time. And my mother-in-law was able to cook, and my our friends and family and my mom, of course, was able to bring food over. And it was just like, it ended up being such a blessing. But when you hear that, you're like, oh, you're living with your in-laws and your baby's in the NICU and you're renovating your house, and whoa, it was a lot. It was a lot. Definitely, Kelly, my mother-in-law, found me crying in the bathroom a few times because it was just very, very, very overwhelming. Um, and then when we brought Faith home from the NICU, um, I did not go back to work. It's like I felt like, well, first of all, two things. When you leave the NICU, it's almost you're celebrating because you were just so excited to bring your baby home. But then there's also a little bit of a hole in your heart because they've become your family. The NICU nurses and doctors have become your family, and you're just so quickly are ripped from that in a good way. But it's just such a crazy feeling to experience that sadness also with leaving that behind because
Right.
they taken such incredible care of your baby, and then it's up to you now to take this baby and take care of it. And there's so much uncertainty with going home from the hospital, and is your baby going to be okay? And it was hard at the end because she just didn't have the strength to eat on her own. And so we were back and forth on should we bring her home with a feeding tube or not. And by God's grace, at the end, she started eating on her own, and we did not have to do that. But it was quite the transition bringing her home and trying to figure all that out. And I felt like I had just had a baby. So even though I had the baby, had Faith 6 weeks ago, it was like I just had her because
Right.
we just were bringing her home.
Right.
So took longer, I took more time to go back. I took more time to be at home with Faith than I thought I would before going back to work. So I ended up, and I had known this second time around because I had gone through the postpartum depression with Kelly Wynne, my first daughter. I wanted to make sure I had enough time for healing. So before Faith was born and I had this NICU experience, I knew that I wanted to take sufficient time, and I had prepped my team and they knew what to do. So I did not need to be involved because they were so amazing. Um, and so I took 4 months, 4 months off, and then I kind of eased back into work. And it was harder than I expected easing back into work because so much had changed for me and my priorities had shifted so much. And when you add two babies to the mix, three, four, I mean, it's a lot more than just one, and you don't realize until when you have one, you're like, wow, this is so much work. There's so much to do and to keep up with. And then you have two, and you have two schedules to keep up with plus work. So the mental load was much more than I expected. And then
And you also added a second baby who
right,
Faith had some additional therapies and things. So in some
right,
ways, I like to say, like when our NICU baby came into the house, we didn't just assume him, but we assumed like this other, even though it wasn't another baby, it was a whole other schedule of like, oh, there's all these other things that we did not have to deal with any of our other babies. So it can feel
right.
very overwhelming. And you're like, okay, so I need to get my brain wrapped around that. So you had some big changes, Kelly, that happened here recently. So tell us, as Faith has gotten a little bit older,
Mhm.
I think she's one. Is that right? Did she just turn one?
She's almost 18 months. I know,
18 months.
crazy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Okay. No,
yeah,
how did
yeah,
that happen? Okay.
yeah.
So she's a little she's a little over 1 inching in on 2, and you made some big decisions professionally. What
Mhm.
did you decide, Kelly?
I just, with a whole lot of prayer, I felt convicted to wind my business down and spend more time with my girls. I unintentionally was giving my family the rest of me and not the best of me. And this was just a personal decision for me and my family. And what I felt like we needed was more of me and less of work. And I spent about a year. So after I kind of eased back into work, I knew that I was coming to a crossroads with work. I was going to either have to scale the business up or scale it down because of where I was in business. I couldn't just continue to coast where we were, which was cool, but I had a big decision to make. And um, after talking to people for a year and really, really in deep prayer about this, I felt God was calling me home. And I was back and forth. I talked to so many different people about selling the business, raising money, partnering, all the things that people have questions about. Why did you just wind it down? Why not sell it? It is an incredible brand that you've built over the last 10 years. And I also wrestled with why, and I have wrestled with why. Why did God want me to wind this business down in this way? Why not the others? And he opened the right doors and he closed the wrong ones. And it's such a blessing to see the outcome now that I have made the announcement. I made my announcement on February 15th that I was going to be spending more time with my family and giving the girls the best of me, not the rest of me. It's kind of my motto. And I had an outpouring of love and support with the messages and the calls and the social media. I mean, the orders. I received more orders in the first 48 hours than I did the entire month of November and December last year, which is my busiest time of the year. So I was so overwhelmed with the love. And after that, I started to receive more messages about women who were just very thankful that I made the announcement in the way I made it, because our world screams success in a very different way than God sees success. So our world screams success is selling a business and making money and fortune and fame and all these awards and glitz and glam on social media and all these things. But success is being with your family. Success is raising two beautiful girls to love the Lord. Success is putting the priority of family first and putting God first. And I didn't realize at the time, but so many people needed to see that in this way, see me do that in this way, because the fashion industry does have a lot of evil, and the fashion industry it's really hard to put those priorities above all else. And for people to see me as a successful entrepreneur who started this business 10 years ago, and to decide that it's not worth it anymore to put the business above my family, was something that people needed to see. And I didn't know that. So I didn't know that that was God's plan. And it was really cool because I went home. I went back to Oxford, Mississippi, which is my second home. For an awards, I received 40 under 40 through the alumni, which was just an incredible honor. And I was talking to different people, and there's a younger girl there that I knew at school, and she told me that she had just listened to a panel of women that were telling her in the audience, "You can do it all. You can do it all. You can do it all." That was the message. And the day I made the announcement, she was feeling like she could not do it all, and she was not working. She was just a stay-at-home mom. When people say that.
I know.
She was doing
don't say that.
much. But she felt like she wasn't doing enough because she also was not working. And for these women to say, "You can do it all," but she felt like she couldn't keep up with her motherly duties at the time, which we all have those days. And then I made that announcement, she just said was very refreshing, and the encouragement that she needed, because you do have to make sacrifices.
Sure.
So it's possible to do both, but everybody has different seasons of life. And my season right now is putting my family first. But I've had other seasons where I was juggling both, but I've made sacrifices. I made some major sacrifices that I wasn't there for Neely Wynne in some of the times that she needed. And then when I was with Neely Wynne, I felt this guilt that I should, my team needs me, my team needs my support. And so I had that constant kind of cycle of the guilt, and I in this season needed all of that to go away.
No, I'm glad that you said seasons because I think that sometimes we look at someone else's season and compare it to our season, and they're not the
Hmm.
same.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think it's a vilifying of like if you work, it's bad. If you stay at home, it's good. I think it depends on your
No.
family and what
Right.
season that you're in. I was the opposite. After I had my NICU baby, while I did take some time off, I actually ended up, I had my own business and I worked from home, but I ended up ramping it up. But we made
Yeah.
some major changes in our home life. Like, what does that really look like? So, regardless of
Right.
where a family is, women either work outside the home or don't work outside the home for many, many reasons. But I love, Kelly, that you're speaking into how you decided, how you prayed about discern, like what is good for our family, and the more important question is what is good for our family in this season. And
Right.
that one change or one decision that you make now may not be the same in 5 years or in 10 years
Yep.
because you'll find yourself
Yep.
in a new season. By then, girl, you're going to have teenagers. So,
Well, I mean, I already have that desire and feeling, of course,
right,
I worked for 10 years. I love it. So
right,
it is, I just feel like God's calling me to be still for a little bit. But that doesn't mean in 6 months I won't be inching back in. But it was just when you're running a business, and this, when you're running a business, it is very different from just a job, from working. It was 24/7. And because it's hard to separate the mental from the
right.
physical. So sometimes when I was with the girls, my mind would be at work.
Right.
And so I need a mental break.
No, that's good. And I think too, women need to hear, we do hear the do it all a lot. And I think
Yeah.
that what we forget to remind ourselves is that somebody has to sacrifice. The challenge
Hmm.
is you don't want to make the same person or the same situation always be the sacrificing one. So, if you're in a season of busyness and you have kids or in y'all's case a child who has more medical needs than another one, so what do you need to do to serve that? And then
Right.
knowing that you'll shift in another season and you'll be like, all right, so I can do this and I can't do that. And so you start to ask yourself
Right.
important questions because you've had life experience that's taught you can go down this path and it may end badly. So before we get to that, we're going to detour and we're going to change and we're going to do some different things. Kelly, I know as women leave the NICU, a lot of them have to make choices about how they serve their families, whether it's taking on another job to pay for medical bills, or whether it's stepping back, or whether it's finding a balance in between. What were some of the questions or the people that entered your life to help you make that decision? What were some questions that you asked yourself to make a decision whether to, like you said, either ramp it up or scale it back?
That's a great question. I love mentors. I love mentors. So I have a lot over the years that I've just grown really close with, that I will confide in for business decisions. I also am really big on therapy. I love therapy, and so talking through all of the thoughts out loud with somebody who isn't necessarily in your immediate bubble also is really helpful. So I did both. I talked to mentors that have been along this ride with me from the beginning, and then I had some Christian therapists that were helping me as well. My family, my husband, of course. I mean, this is a huge family decision to make. So we had to make this decision together and to be on the same page with all of that. Um, and then I'm a connector, and I just love, I mean, part of this business that I love so much is just meeting new people. And so every time I would have a meeting and a conversation, it would lead me to another person, to another person. And I just felt like I took a little piece of information kind of from each person that I talked to. And along the way, I realized how much value I had in my business and what I had built. Because it was cool to hear other people's perspective. Because sometimes when you're nose to the ground in work, you don't really lift your head up to see everything that you've built. And so it gave me the opportunity to really reflect on the last 10 years and everything that we have accomplished. And it's awesome. It's awesome because we've made such an impact in women's lives that I didn't even really realize until really this final chapter and making this announcement and the emails and the messages that people sent me. It was overwhelming and I did not know it was coming at all. And so to receive that blessing, to see the impact we've made in the last 10 years was the biggest gift I could have asked for.
People can't see it if they're listening, but you have the biggest smile on your face. Mentors really can be
Yeah.
a tremendous sounding board for some things that you already know, but you get affirmation on, or a perspective that you haven't thought of because they're a little bit further down the road. They've lived through something that you haven't yet lived through, and
Right.
they're invaluable. I love that you mentioned that. I do a 2-minute take at the end, and I'll always talk about something that's probably going to be the one thing that I share. But so, Kelly, if there is a mom or a dad listening to this and they're at a crossroads and they have to make a decision to a change in their family, they either have to decide, yes, I'm going to go back to work and do these things for my family, or I'm feeling called to do something different and maybe spend more time at home. What would your advice be to them as they figure out what is the best path for their family in this season?
Um, I would say, I mean, I know this is cliche, but give yourself grace because I don't think I gave myself enough grace and also allow yourself the time because you don't want to make an impulse decision based on the trauma that you just went through. You need to feel and work through all of those emotions before being able to make that life decision. I feel like I made the decision to wind things down. It was, I guess, well, maybe it was quicker than I thought, but but it was 6 to 8 months after Faith was born, and I just quickly figured out that I wouldn't be able to do it all with the needs that Faith had. But give yourself grace. It's just such a good reminder. And then also when everything just feels too hard and too much, the quote that always helped me was, heavier the rain, brighter the rainbow. Hang in there, you're getting stronger. Because all of these challenges and the suffering that we do experience truly makes you stronger. So that's why you need that extra time to really just sit in what has happened over the past however long it's happened to you.
Well, the strongest people I know are those who have graduated from the NICU. So, Kelly, thank you for sharing a little bit of your strength with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Wasn't that a great reflection on how do you find the right balance for your particular family? In today's 2-minute take, there are two things that Kelly said that I believe are worth reiterating and reminding you of. Number one, your season is your season. It's hard, I think, sometimes when we look at our particular NICU stay and then we look at someone else's NICU stay and we're like, well, maybe we should do it that way, forgetting that there are factors and variables that are happening in their life that are not happening in our own. And so recognizing that in your particular season, maybe you need to ramp things up. Maybe you need to take on more jobs because financially, that's how you're going to pay the bills. Or maybe you scale back because your baby needs more of you, more of your time. Maybe they have more therapies, more interventions, and they need more of you. But only your family can decide what makes the most sense for you and what that balance looks like. And then the second thing that Kelly shared, and I think it speaks into the Hand to Hold mission, and I don't even think that she realized it at the time, but mentors. It was a NICU mentor with Hand to Hold that changed my life, that helped us navigate through the most difficult, hardest, darkest season and valley of our life. And had it not been for someone who had been there before, who knew maybe some of the questions or some of the things that we were going to encounter, and they intervened and they helped, and they were such a beacon of hope for us. So as you find yourself figuring out what is life going to look like, how do I balance work and how do I balance life and my new NICU baby? that's going to look different for everyone. But I think a mentor, particularly if you have not had the chance to find a mentor with hand to hold, I would highly encourage it, because I know that, for one, it just made me feel seen. Like, these things that I'm experiencing are normal, and also they could help me navigate what comes next. What questions do I ask? Where do I go? And please tell me that I'm going to figure this out and that I'm going to be stronger because of it. And Kelly certainly shared that at the very end, that you are stronger than you think, and giving yourself grace allows you to find that strength. So with that, I will see y'all next time for another great conversation. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you loved today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.